$350 a year, I think.
I guess that's not that much. For a legislator, that's a lot, because that's not how much I make.
Number two, I heard Lucy Mason and Tom O'Halloran on Casablanca, one of our stations, say they were worried about the Republicans, the two Republicans that are on the radio said they were worried about the Republicans in the Arizona legislature. They said that Russell Pierce crafted the budget over the break with a couple of lobbyists.
That's all true. So you all know Lucy Mason was a former state representative. She's turned out, so she couldn't run again. Tom O'Halloran was a former state representative and state senator. He lost his primary election, as you know, to Sylvia Allen. Steve Pierce, sorry. Sylvia Allen beat Kopenicki. Can I just tell a Sylvia Allen story real quick? So we're on the floor the other day debating this access issue, and one of my colleagues stood up. There's only 9 of us, so it was Steve Verdo, stood up, and no, I think it was David Shapiro, stood up and started talking about how the cuts to access would mean that people couldn't even get colonoscopies anymore. And Sylvia Allen, bless her heart, stood up and said, well, people need to start saving their pennies for their colonoscopy. I can tell you, I got a piggy bank out that night, and I started putting my change in there, right? Yeah, and I don't need to, of course, because Sylvia Allen, like myself, we have state insurance, and so we would get colonoscopies if we needed them for free. You would pay for it because you're a taxpayer. Anyway, so Tom O'Halloran lost to Steve Pierce, and Steve Pierce is the whip. He's the majority whip in the legislature. And I think the two of them are right in saying that they're worried about this Republican majority, because while we certainly had a conservative Republican majority in the last election, the last 2 years, this Republican majority, supermajority, is so much more ideologically conservative than the last one. Like, significantly. There are so many people who have come to the Capitol with the sole purpose of advancing a very narrow ideology. And these are not individuals who are interested in the bread and butter problems that Arizonans face every single day. So I think you're going to see more and more of this rigid ideological discourse coming from our state legislature. And my hope is that through our efforts we can help Arizonans hear that and help get the word out. One last place to go for media. There's actually a channel on television, channel 123, where you can watch the state legislature. It's like our version of C-SPAN. It's not as fancy. We don't have any logos or anything because it's the state legislature. The entire thing is run out of the basement of the state Senate, which flooded last year. But you can watch all of the proceedings of both the House and the Senate. And I wouldn't do it at night. It's scary. But, keep the lights on, watch it. And share what you learn, because you'll be frightened. Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I'm Bob Lynn from Prescott. I'm going to go talk with our Representative Gosar tomorrow.
Good luck.
If I can get in. And I'm wondering if you could enlighten me with what you think he'll be saying about health care.
Yeah.
And what you think maybe the 2 best questions might be to ask him. Good.
So everyone knows Representative Gosar is your new member of Congress. He's a dentist, and he's hired pretty much all of Sarah Palin's staff to run his office. So I know, it's going to, you betcha. So they may have a lot of talking points, but not a lot of substance, so I'd watch for that. So Representative Gosar is one of the individuals who voted for repeal of health care about 2 weeks ago. What I think is interesting is that the Republicans during the election said, they had a little phrase about health care, repeal and replace. Do you remember that? Well, they voted to repeal, but there has been no talk of replacement. They have no legislation. And so the first thing I would do is ask him how he feels about removing the Patient Bill of Rights that was instituted on September 23rd of 2010. Because the Patient Bill of Rights means that every single person in this room who happens to be on Medicare Part D is going to see their donut hole close. Already did, right? The donut hole already closed by $250 last year. It's closing by another $500 this year. So does he want everyone who's on Medicare Part D to give that money back and not get their prescriptions? And let's take another issue. Who in here has a pre-existing condition? I do. Everybody, right? It's America. We all have pre-existing conditions, right? Right now, in this country, it is now illegal to deny health care to children who have pre-existing health conditions. Does he want to take that away? And my question would be, what do you tell all the parents of children who are born with Down syndrome or autism or cystic fibrosis or spina bifida? What do we say to those people? I'm sorry, too bad for you. And what about the individuals who now, finally, for the first time in our country's history, can no longer be kicked off their health care when they get sick? And we all know the concept of insurance. You pay money to ensure that when you need help, you will get the help you need. So it seems somewhat ironic that healthcare companies were kicking people off of healthcare at the very time they needed that care the most. But that is now illegal. So no longer in this state will a woman who is diagnosed with breast cancer receive a letter from her healthcare company saying, sorry, you have breast cancer, you also don't have healthcare. Does he want to take that away? These are the questions that we need to ask to the individuals who want to repeal health reform, because they have no replacement. They have no replacement. They have no answer for the woman with breast cancer or the dad whose child has just been diagnosed with autism. They have no response. So the second thing I would ask him is about his health care. Because Dr. Gosar is now enrolled in the best healthcare system in the world, the congressional healthcare system. Is he accepting that care?
I don't think so.
I'm not sure if he is.
You should check, because the list of people who have rejected their health care is very, very small. So I would check on that. You can probably find it online before you go to meet with him, just so you can verify, trust but verify, yeah. Check and see. Because any person who voted for repeal and yet is keeping their own gold standard or indeed platinum standard health care, I think has some real explaining to do to the Arizona public. Now that's not unique to them. For example, here in Arizona, every state employee, myself included, elected officials, we all are on the state health care plan. And it's a generous plan. I have good health care. And I also go to sleep each night resting comfortably in the knowledge that if I needed a liver transplant, I would get one. So while the 300 individuals, roughly, in Arizona who are waiting for their transplants won't get them, if I needed a transplant, if the governor needed a transplant, if the Senate president needed a transplant, we would get those very same transplants. And I believe it is just fundamentally wrong to tell someone else that they can't get the health care that I have. That's just wrong. So I would ask Dr. Gosar about that. Yeah. Yeah. So there's been a petition filed to recall Governor Brewer, and there's also been a petition filed to recall Senator Pierce, State Senator Pierce. You can find it online, but I have to tell you, recall efforts have never been successful in Arizona. We've never had a single recall efforts in Arizona that's been successful. So I would say go investigate and see how organized the organization is and what kind of power they think they might have. But no, Meacham was not recalled. He was impeached for breaking the law, and then he went to prison. So Jan Brewer hasn't done that. Right. So I would go look at the recall, take a look at it, investigate it, but I'd be a little bit wary, because these efforts take Herculean efforts, lots of money, a lot of energy, and then you have to get the majority of Arizonans to support you, which as of right now we don't have on that issue. So it might be a better use of our time to spend time doing what we talked about earlier, which is exposing what they're doing and then focusing on the next election cycle. Yes?
I would just like to see some more young Democrats, some more young people in our draft.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that's a challenge we face in a lot of the active Democratic groups around the state. But one thing you could think about is where are young people in this valley? Colleges, right? So maybe do some outreach to some of those students. One thing that would be good to certainly let those students know is the impact of the state budget cuts on their own lives. Because we all have seen this over the last several years. As the state has decreased its commitment to higher education, schools have been drastically increasing tuition rates. So while our state constitution says that higher education must be, quote, as nearly free as possible, that promise is no longer held in Arizona. We violate that promise every single day. So letting students know that the actions of state government are directly impacting them and their ability to have a strong debt-free future may get some folks to be interested. Yes?
Kyrsten, where would you suggest, knowing the budget situation, what would you suggest as the top 3 or 4 areas that both revenue increases could occur as well as perhaps some cuts?
Well, I think that's an important question because often the issue is being framed as, well, if you don't want to cut education and healthcare, where would you cut?
Right.
And I believe that that is a false question,
Okay.
right? So we should not fall into that trap of just believing that that's all the answers are. So think about in your own lives. When you have tough times in your own family, what do? Well, the first thing you do is you start cutting out the excess, right? Maybe you stop going to movies, maybe you stop going out to dinner, you don't buy as many clothes, etc. So that's about reduction. The second thing you do is usually contact friends and family for help, to borrow, right? That's number 2. And then number 3, when it finally gets to the point where you've got 3 kids sitting at the table and you only have enough food for 2 kids, what you don't do is tell little Johnny to starve to death, right? That's the wrong answer. You get more food, right? You get food for your kid. And that's the part that Arizona has refused to do. So we have reduced much of state spending. Now it's important to note that Arizona, even before the crisis, had the lowest per capita operating budget in the country, which meant we spent less per person than any state in the country. That was before the recession. So now we're like rivaling Puerto Rico. Okay, number 2, borrowing. The state has done way too much borrowing. We're now about $2 billion in debt, which is going to mean that our children and our grandchildren are going to have to face this budget crisis forever. It's going to last for decades. Number 3 is about revenue. Now, I do not support increasing taxes, particularly not on Arizonans who are struggling, because Arizonans are working hard just to feed their families and make it through the day and keep their kids in school and keep their homes. So I don't think we need to increase taxes. What I do think we need to do, and I've created a detailed plan to explain exactly how to do this, is to eliminate corporate tax loopholes. There are big corporations and the rich who are getting away without paying their fair share. There are over $10 billion of corporate tax loopholes in our tax code. Now, in Arizona, and I just want to compare that. Our state budget is $8 billion. We have more lost revenue in corporate tax loopholes than our entire state budget. So I propose that we just close a very small number of those loopholes to get the revenue that we need to pay for schools and kids. And I think that's reasonable. It's also fair, because right now those big corporations and the rich are not paying their fair share. So I'll give you a couple examples of loopholes that should be closed. Right now, if you decide to go get elective liposuction because you feel badly about your hips, you don't pay a tax on that.
Service.
Right?
Yeah.
But when I went and bought a backpack so that my 6-year-old niece could go to school, I paid a tax on that. Right now, if Britney Spears comes to Phoenix and spends a week at a spa getting multiple spa treatments, she pays no tax on those spa treatments. But my colleague David Shapira pays a tax on formula for his infant daughter, right? That's not fair. If someone goes and joins a country club and has an annual membership at a country club, they pay no tax on that. But last week, when I had to replace 2 tires on my car, I paid a tax for that. So right now, regular Arizonans are paying more than their fair share. It's the big corporations and the rich who aren't paying their fair share. So my proposal and the proposal of my colleagues at the state legislature is that we close just a small portion of those loopholes. And that would eliminate our deficit. It would also create a more stable, fair, and less volatile tax system for the future. So the next time we had a recession, it wouldn't be so bumpy. We could weather the storm better in the future. So that's my solution.
Good.
Yep.
We recently had a tax increase that was supposed to go to education.
Oh, yes, that was a lie.
How much was that realized in that, and where did it go?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is a lie that I've been talking about for quite some time. So you all may recall that last spring the state legislature referred an issue to the ballot that you all voted on this spring, asking you to raise your own sales tax by a penny for 3 years, and that money would be dedicated to education, public safety, and health care. I voted no to refer that issue to the ballot. And some people said, well, why are you doing that, Kyrsten? Don't you care about kids in schools? And I said, oh, I care about kids in schools. That's why I'm voting no, because this referral is a lie. And let me tell you how it's a lie. 1, there was no language in that initiative that required the state to maintain current spending and add this new revenue on top of it. Nothing. So what happened was that new revenue came in and they pulled money out of the bottom.